What's poppin', people? If it's your first time coming to the channel, hello. I hope to see you next time. If you're returning, welcome back. Great to see you. So, if you're familiar at all with the bodybuilding world, you're probably aware that the Pittsburgh Pro is known as the biggest guest posing of the year. Now, the Pittsburgh Pro is promoted by Jim Mannion, who is the head of the IFBB. So, of course, they're going to get a lot of cool people there to guest pose. The headliners this year from Open Bodybuilding are Big Ramy, two-time Mr. Olympia, Derek Lunsford, Mr. Olympia runner-up, and 212 Mr. Olympia, Samson Dauda, Arnold Classic champion, Nick Walker, Arnold Classic champion, Sean Clarita, a two-time 212 Olympian, Hunter Labrada, who won the Chicago Pro a while ago and is known as one of the better posers in open bodybuilding, and Rafael Brandau, who actually was not able to make it because he became sick, so he wasn't able to come. So I'm going to be watching Nick Strength and Power's video on the guest posing. It's the HD full pro guest posing. I'm not sure if he comments on it or anything. I haven't watched it yet, so I'm going to watch it here with you guys, give you guys my live reaction to it, and see how it goes. Shout out, by the way, to Nick Strength and Power, always making great bodybuilding content, been following him for years. It's also super cool to interact with on social media, so shout out to him for making this great video as well.
All right, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power, and what a great guest posing we just had at the Pittsburgh Pro 2023. Everybody showed up with the exception of Rafael Brandau, who was sick and couldn't make it. But this year, Big Ramy actually showed up. You had Samson Dauda, if we're going from left to
Not the call out for Big Ramy not showing up last year.
right, Samson, Ramy, Sean Clarita, Nick Walker, Derek Lunsford, and Hunter Labrada. So to me, this was actually pretty surprising because I felt like Ramy looked a little bit under.
You know, I wasn't going to say anything about not knowing who the guy on the far right is, but then Nick also didn't say his name. Someone could comment down below who he is. He looks great. I'd love to know.
Sized in this group of guys. Ramy, who is supposed to be the biggest guy pound for pound, really didn't look that big here. You had this really round and full off-season Nick Walker. You had Samson Dauda at 313 plus pounds. God knows how big he is at this point now. That was a couple weeks ago. He said he was 313. But that's what we talked about going into this guest posing is now you've got off-season Samson next to Ramy. This big 300 plus pound Samson. Is Ramy still going to look as big? And I think the answer to that question is no.
I'd agree with that. I think Samson actually looks the biggest on stage, and surprisingly, despite being one of the shorter guys, Derek, I would say, is a pretty close second as well, especially from the back. His lats are absolutely insane, so he's definitely going to be pushing for that top spot this year. It's going to be a wonder if Hottie can hold him off.
And you've got this big, like I said, off-season Nick. You've got Derek Lunsford that looks like he's been packing on some size in this off-season, your Olympia runner-up. I saw him at the Arnold Classic, and he did some poses in the hotel room, and he looked massive. He looks definitely bigger here than he looked in March at the Arnold. He looks like he's put on a significant amount of weight since then. So it looks like he's not messing around. He really is trying to play with the big boys and play the size game a little bit. Samson looked incredible, like I said, being pretty much, I would say, the tallest guy in this guest posing.
Yeah, tallest guy by a wide,
best frame
by
to
a wide
carry
margin.
300 plus pounds. And dare I say, I don't know if it's the lighting or the angle or what, but dare I say, he almost looked bigger than Ramy when he was standing next to Ramy. Maybe it was...
What'd I say? Told you he looks like the biggest. Samson, biggest one on the stage there. Nick said it. I said it. Better believe it.
Because he was on the end, but he looked wider. He looked a little bit rounder. It looked like his physique had a little bit more pop to it. To me, Ramy looked kind of flat and small, but again, I want to say kudos to Ramy for showing up this time because, as you guys know, it was like a big controversy that Ramy didn't show up to last year's Pittsburgh Pro, and a lot of people felt like he was penalized for that because this is Jim Mannion's show. But honestly, Samson really impressed me here next to Ramy. To me, he looked bigger, rounder, had more pop, more impressive, and Ramy overall looked kind of flat. Now, I'm sure you guys will let me know what you think in the comments down below.
Ramy looks flat, but he does look lean. I wonder if maybe they realized that because his conditioning was off and Hottie won on conditioning, if maybe they're trying this year to keep the approach of, you know, we've got this much muscle, let's just stay relatively lean throughout the year and make that more of kind of like your habit so that when you come in, you're more used to being lean. Maybe that's something they're going for. I'm not sure. I'd be interested to see when it comes up to the Olympia this year.
below about Rami versus Samson and about this guest posing in general. Of course, I don't want to forget you had Sean Clarita there. But like I said, in this group of guys where you've got these mass monster men's open guys now in the off season, several of them probably close to 300 pounds, with Nick and Hunter probably around 280. Derek, I would say, probably like mid 260s here. He looks big. And then of course Rami and Samson both over 300 pounds here. I think Sean Clarita gets a little bit overshadowed, maybe a little bit overlooked in this group of guys because these guys are massive. Nick looked really big. A very contrasting look from how we saw Nick in the Arnold Classic, where he was a little bit flatter, more depleted, probably the most ripped version of Nick that we had seen. But here, much rounder, much fuller, obviously off-season. Just like last year, I would say Derek is holding his own here, but that kind of goes without saying now after his runner-up position at the Olympia, so you kind of know he's going to hold his own at this point. But he does look significantly bigger to me. Put him next to Nick Walker, he looks still pretty big. Hunter Labrada, I think, is still having that issue with his midsection. It still looks kind of weird in a lot of these poses. But yeah, overall, Samson really impressed me. Nick looked impressive, seeing this rounder, fuller Nick.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but he does look still a little descended. Obviously, he pulls it in. You just saw it right there. He pulls it in pretty well. You can definitely tell that he's aware of it and he's working on it, so shout out to him. Keep doing that. But he's right. I feel like especially with how much shorter of a physique he is, like maybe someone like Samson can kind of get away with it a little bit. Honestly, you can kind of see in this shot his little rounder. But being shorter like that, there's less space up and down. So the more space you have side to side, front to back, is going to be noticeable, especially right there in the center.
And Derek really impressed me from how big he looks. He looks, like I said, at the Arnold, he looked really big, but here he looks even bigger. So that, to me, is pretty impressive. But
like I said, biggest one Samson, second biggest Derek.
I'm very curious to hear your guys' thoughts in the comment section below about this guest posing. This is always, one of the more interesting ones, if not the most interesting one of the year, seeing these guys. I, for one, was most excited to see that Rami actually showed up. I wasn't really sure what to expect after last year, but I was proud of him for actually following through on his commitment. And again, I think that at the end of the day, if a Mr. Olympia or former Mr. Olympia doesn't want to do anything all year long, just wants to win the title and go home and not have to do anything, I think he should be able to do that. Once you win the title, you got paid. They're not paying you like a year-round salary to show up to these events. But they were going to pay him to show up last year to this specific event. He did say, yes, I'll do it. He committed to it. So I think if you commit to something, you should show up and should have to show up. But I do want to point out that if you are Mr. Olympia, like Hadi Chupin is right now, he showed up. He was the best bodybuilder on that day. He got his prize money for the competition that day. Realistically, if Hadi Chupin doesn't want to do a single thing the rest of the year, I think he should have that option. And the same is true for Rami, but I think once you commit to an event like this, a guest posing like this, I think you should have to show up and follow through for the fan, not even for the promoters, for the fans, because I feel like a lot of people showed up here specifically wanting to see Rami, because you don't get very many opportunities throughout the year if you live in the U.S. to see Rami in person, and this was one of those opportunities.
Those are all fair points. I do, honestly, for the most part, agree with him as far as the athletes not needing to really do anything once they've won the Mr. Olympia. They're not necessarily obligated to do anything because that's not part of the title. With that said, the ones who do go and do stuff, the ones who become kind of an ambassador of the sport, the ones who, they are Mr. Olympia. The Mr. Olympia is the biggest title in bodybuilding. So if you are Mr. Olympia, like it or not, you're one of, if not the faces of bodybuilding for the next year. Just like how, Miss America goes and does trips to the smaller pageants and goes and does volunteer work and does all these sort of things. The Mr. Olympias who go out and become an advocate for the sport and a face for the sport always wind up being the ones that are more cherished, from then on. Like Jay Cutler, only won 4 titles, but still always in the conversation for the best, one of the best bodybuilders of all times, versus all these guys that have 7, 8, etc. And that's because he's been such an ambassador of the sport. He takes the time to go out and meet the people and be amongst the public and go to events and do guest poses. And he goes and does, military trainings over at bases around the world, and, really takes the time out of his day to go and take his name and his presence and contribute that to the greater good of the sport of bodybuilding. So with that said, I do agree they shouldn't necessarily be obligated to do things like that unless they do sign a contract and they're going to get paid. Like that's very specifically, that would be great. But even just from kind of like a emotional, moral standpoint, I think that even if they're not necessarily obligated, it's definitely a better look, and it's sort of a like a subtext of like being the champion. You know, I don't know. Maybe just my thoughts. Let me know if you agree.
So at the end of the day, props to Rami for showing up. Great guest posing, very exciting. Let me know what you guys thought in the comment section below. Who do you guys think looked the best? Who do you guys think looked the worst? And what did you think overall? Make sure you guys like and subscribe for more content just like this one. And I want to give a shout out to my buddy Trent Kelly.
All right, looks like that's about the end of the video as far as the posing goes. Overall, pretty exciting guest posing. Got a great lineup there. They all looked solid, even for off season. They were all in pretty good shape. They were all, obviously plenty of definition. They all had abs. Even with the mentions of the two or three people that may or may not have, off season stomachs or may or may not be holding it as tight, it's still off season. They're still like 300-pound guys. So super, super impressive. I think the show went over pretty well as far as the guest posing goes. Glad there weren't any controversies this year. And I'm excited because this Pittsburgh Pro kind of kicks off a really big slant of good pro shows happening, back to back to back. So I'm super excited for the shows coming up. Maybe if he does good videos on those, I'll react to those. Maybe I'll react to some other people's. Let me know if there's any specific shows you want me to cover. If you want me to talk about any different divisions, maybe Classic, because that's specifically what I'm in. And yeah, I hope you guys have a great day. Look forward to seeing you next time. Peace out.